Right? It's being recorded.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today is March 14th, and I thank everyone for their flexibility on being able, with very little notice, to shift from Wednesday to Friday, which keeps us on track to be able to get through all the projects. So seeing that there's a quorum, I'm going to call the meeting to order by first going around, making sure the committee can hear and we can hear them. And I'll just call out your names as I see them on the screen. Bob?
Present.
Let's see. Councilor Lord?
Present.
Sarah Marshall?
Present.
And one, two, and Lee Edwards. I knew there was another. No, everyone else here is a presenter. And Melissa, I'm going to let you, you know which order you told people they would be coming in. So we have a variety of departments here today. And I think you had said recreation or Ray was going to go first because of scheduling, but I don't know whether that's still true.
Yeah, so Ray was going to go first on Wednesday when we were supposed to have the meeting. So I apologize to everyone. It's I had trouble with the website and did not post in time. So I know this has been a scramble, but if we could do the order of Stephanie first, and then Ray. So Stephanie in sustainability, then Ray, and then the fire department because they have the biggest package. So you guys can wait. Are you okay with that, Chiefs? Okay.
And I just wanted to let everyone know, because a few people came on just because we were charting. Melissa's going to be able to put an updated vehicle list in the packet, although it's going to be missing DPW. And several questions were sent in advance and they were answered. So there are questions and answers in the packet. I actually hadn't seen those, but we can continue, if people haven't seen them, to proceed as we would normally, but we'll have them as part of the record for when we're looking at the project list. So I think we're ready to go, Stephanie.
Okay, thank you so much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great.
Yes, I can.
Excellent. So I was pretty much moving forward with requesting the same amount of capital for this year as well as last year. Right now, our request is broken down to several categories: 150,000 for engineering studies or consultants for weatherization and energy efficiency, 25,000 for engineering pertaining to solar installation projects recommended in a CADMIS report that was done in 2022. 50,000 additional funding to support bridging gaps for projects that have more standard equipment and sort of making those transitions to more sustainable options. So this funding can bridge a gap for, say, as an example, a vehicle that there might be funding for a regular standard vehicle, but we could use some of these funds to help get that vehicle to be an electric vehicle or a hybrid vehicle. And the difference in the cost. And then 25,000 is requested for continuing to support infrastructure at the community gardens, specifically the Fort River Farm Community Garden and Amethyst Brook, and then also to sort of look to maybe build out some other community garden opportunities. So that's basically the request for this year, which is fairly similar to last year.
And I'm just looking for hands, so I'll start out. Last year, did you spend the whole amount? You know, you gave us a list and yes.
Yes, so we did not. And part of the reason is because I've been working much more closely with facilities over the past few years, and we're strategizing on how to sort of decarbonize buildings, decarbonize transportation. And so we haven't quite been able to move at least the building portion forward yet, which is really what the chunk of that funding really is really dedicated for buildings, because we're waiting on the assessments to be completed. So once those assessments are completed, this funding could be used for an engineering design, which is almost always part of projects. And even when we're looking for funding for grant funding, in almost every single case, we're required to have some kind of engineering design as part of the application process to secure funding, because they want those to be shovel ready, basically. So I'm thinking about, green communities, unless I'm getting funding for more studies, which, again, is competitive and then we're not guaranteed to get it. So having this kind of access to these opportunities is really important because, at any given time, if there's a project opportunity that presents itself, we can't always foresee if something is going to go down. It's an opportunity to have funds accessible to say, we can get the engineering done with these funds. So that is the case for at least some of those funds. I would say is, the solar installation projects, I would say that's a similar response to that with the buildings, is that we're just not quite ready. We haven't been ready to sort of apply those funds quite yet. And then the other funds, I've definitely been asked by other departments to help support purchase of, for instance, we installed EV chargers at the police department. That was a collaboration with the facilities department, sustainability, and facilities to install those single port charging infrastructure at the APD. We'd like to start doing that to more facilities. So those funds were, accessible. It wasn't a long-term plan. It just, the opportunity was arising. And so we were asked by APD if we could do that. So we were able to pivot and provide the funds to do that, in short order. And then as far as the community gardens, there's still more infrastructure that has to be installed in terms of a water source for the Fort River Farm Community Garden. And I think there's more that we could do to support the Amethyst Brook Community Garden as well.
Lee, I see your hand is up.
Uh, yeah, yes. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I have a question about the gardens, because I know that we have a citizen's request for support for a garden in some particular area, and I'm wondering if it would be at all appropriate under this. And my second question is it likely that some amount of money every year is going to come along for support of community gardens? Is this, once you put a garden in, is it the responsibility of the town to keep maintaining it, or is it the responsibility of the entity where the garden has been seeded, as it were, to keep maintaining it?
Okay, that was a two-part question. So
Yeah.
I'll start with the first part. I apologize that I'm not aware of the citizens' request for the garden. So I don't even know how much that is or what was or where it's being requested for. So I'm not sure. My response would be possibly. I don't see why not. I think it just depends on how much and where it is. And then as far as sort of the long term, I think the idea is that these funds, at least in my mind, are sort of to get the gardens up and running. So I do foresee that there may be like ongoing things like, compost is a big purchase item. That's going to be every year. There's always going to be a need for compost. If infrastructure needs are things like, the water source, if something breaks down, we'll certainly need funding to support, fixing, whatever the water source is. I do think, we've supplied at least the Fort River Farm Garden, getting that up and running. We've supported them, and I will say this is because we used ARPA funds, but we did supply them with some tools to begin with, not a tool for every gardener, but just tools that are accessible. So if a gardener forgot something or something broke when they were there, they would have access. I don't think it's the responsibility of the town to buy every gardener tool, but I do think having some kind of general supply accessible at the gardens would be beneficial and helpful. So that may be a year-to-year kind of request. So I do think there will be ongoing requests to support the gardens in that manner.
I see Sarah has a question.
I have two questions. First about the garden, or maybe a comment. I wouldn't consider compost to be a capital request. That's a
Mm.
yearly or at least frequent supply, like, I don't know, weed preventer or fungicide if you use it, maybe not in the community garden. But in any case, I wouldn't support that if it is being included in a capital request. But my question about the bridging, the bridging funds, which I understand is to pay the premium for an electric vehicle over gas powered, or maybe it's hybrid. Does somebody actually calculate that premium? Or is this just kind of, here's some money to help?
Well, it's been primarily available as money to help, but I would say that, for instance, with the fire department, they installed anti-idling technology on the ambulance that came from sustainability funds. So they purchased the ambulance with a capital funds request, but to get that technology on to the ambulance, they used sustainability funds to help them.
So that was priced. They knew what the cost of that was.
For that, in that particular instance, yes. But like, for instance, the charging that we put on APD that we just installed, that wasn't necessarily calculated ahead of time. That was something that came sort of, it came up as they were looking ahead to, in the future, be purchasing electric vehicles. They wanted to be able to be equipped with the charging so that they could move forward and have that infrastructure ready to go. And we do have a new, we do have an updated vehicle policy, and becoming, in our application to become a climate leader community, we were required to update our vehicle policy so that new vehicle purchases for staff. So I'm not saying all of our equipment needs to all be electric. Eventually, we would like to move in that direction. But for staff vehicles right now, they're required to be replaced with electric vehicles primarily first. And if for whatever reason an electric vehicle isn't suitable or available for that need, then it would be a hybrid vehicle. So
Yes,
we are
but
transitioning.
I don't feel that's answering my question. And installing an EV charger is a separate capital thing, but you're saying there's $50,000 to contribute towards electric vehicles. And my question is that going to be attributed based on the actual extra cost of buying the EV vehicle compared to the not EV vehicle?
Yeah, she's talking about, does that help buy
The difference
the
is the
car?
cost or
Yes.
difference between those
Yeah.
vehicles.
Yes, well, if it's being requested, I mean, this is also applies for buildings as well. So for instance, the calculating the difference between replacing a boiler and then putting in a heat pump, typically those things are factored out. I don't have a list of things right now, but if someone is coming to me and requesting that funding, then they are calculated out.
Okay, so this is a pool, basically, but then it will be spent according to actual calculations of here's.
Oh, yes,
Okay,
absolutely. Yeah, it's
all
not
right.
willy-nilly handed out. It's, like,
Right.
we have this thing that we want to purchase and we want to make it more efficient. Here's the
Right.
cost without the efficiency. Here's the cost with the
That
efficiency.
was,
Yes.
yes, that was my
Yes,
question.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry I didn't fully understand your question.
Okay, and then what about the compost? Tell me that's not a capital.
Well, I guess honestly, I mean, to me, it's, I do see that as when we buy equipment for a department, is that, if I was replacing a telephone, is that going to be a capital expense? I mean, compost is, I don't know if you're seeing it as an operations thing or, as, and in my mind, it's, I mean, it doesn't seem operational. It does seem like the purchase of something that's used. I guess I would question you as like how you view it. I think it could go either way. Quite frankly, in my mind, I put it towards capital because it seemed more of like the tools. It seems um, like purchasing. I agree, purchasing fertilizer. To me, those are capital expenses. I haven't seen them as operational expenses. And if that's otherwise, I just need to be educated on the difference, but that's why I put it in capital.
Okay, well,
So,
I would say it's like gasoline. You know, it's used over time. You apply it to your asset. It's not part of the asset, and
Well,
it's not. So that's but maybe we have some official policy. I don't know. I think there's also a dollar value for
yeah,
whatever.
there's a
capital-
$10,000 value, Sarah, for it's
Yeah,
somehow it's not capital if it's not that much.
right, right. So telephone, yeah. So I don't know how much compost costs. I don't buy it in anything like that quantity, but I just have that, I have that concern.
So I want to ask one, Lee, if you don't mind, that's not related to the farms. It's one that you've already answered in the answer sheet, but when we met and we were talking about the request for bangs, one of the things Dave Zomek had, and he is here, but he had said it could be if we wanted to reduce or eliminate it, he said one of the things we might need to do is the design for the boiler
Mhm.
for the bangs, where
Mhm.
everything else, the rest of the system will be ready. And I asked whether the design for that could come out of your sustainability. And I just read your answer, and the answer was yes. So it
Mhm.
could.
Mhm.
absolutely,
So we wouldn't
100%.
have to have a separate line item for it. It could draw on your funds.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. And now Lee.
Yeah, this, I think, Kathy, is a question more for you. I mean, it seems to me that every once in a while I read something in the paper that says, are we going to keep maintaining Cherry Hill as a municipal golf
let's-
course?
We have to go now that's a good segue to Ray Harp, who runs it, and that's a separate piece, if you don't mind keeping
Okay,
it.
okay, it just
Yeah,
seems
because
that-
it's completely relevant to one of the requests that's
right,
an intersection with Stephanie and Ray.
perfect,
So
perfect.
you've heard the question already, so I think, does anyone else have any questions just of the sustainability fund, or should we go to when I said there's an intersection, because it's charging stations? Bob, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I just I don't want to keep belaboring the point on compost, but the town collects compost at the transfer station, bagfuls after bagful. What happens to that? Can we use that on the community farms?
I think I don't know if I think some of it may have been used, but I also think that when we're using the compost on the gardens, I know because of where they're located, we've been more careful about what we put on the soil there because of the runoff, because there are wetlands all around it. I was the former wetlands administrator, so it's one of those things that I'm always thinking about. So I think we've been very careful to source our compost from somewhere when we know exactly what's going into it. And we've worked with folks at the UMass Ag Division in terms of locating sources and that kind of thing. So we don't just use any compost.
Okay, fair enough.
These are great questions. So do you want to just slide into, part of Ray's request was related to to golf course and charging stations, correct? So I'm turning it over to you, Ray.
I actually don't have anything immediate for charging stations. That's Melissa, do you want to speak? I think there is, if there's questions about that charging station, that is a
So the
later issue.
charging,
Okay,
yeah,
so
I'm
that was
sorry.
just that's under Stephanie. Okay,
Yeah,
sorry.
no, so the charging stations as they relate to Cherry Hill is an out year request, I think in 28.
Yeah.
Okay,
Because
in
we
28.
collectively as a group, meaning Stephanie, Ray, and I, were looking at the renewal of the golf cart leases that Ray just did, and he has currently a 3-year lease. But at the end of that lease, it occurred to us that we should be looking at a more sustainable option at the Cherry Hill Golf Course to be consistent with, our overall goals as a community to do the most have the least carbon footprint. And electric golf carts are very common and would work fine, but the facility is not set up currently to maintain that structure. So we put it on as an out year request, with like, I mean, honestly, I made up the numbers. I don't really know what it's going to cost. We'll look into that, but it's not something that we need to do right now. It's part of like, well, we have some time. We currently have a golf cart solution, but when we go to renew that, is there a more sustainable option? And in order to do that, we would need enough charging stations to accommodate enough carts, which we don't have right now. Right now, of course, it's just gas and they're parked where they're parked and they don't need to plug into anything. So that additional expense of the golf cart charging stations to be made available, and the additional cost that the electric carts are currently more expensive than the gas cars. And so we kind of looked at that pricing with Stephanie, figured out that we couldn't do that for this lease renewal, but that we should look at it for next time.
Okay, so Ray, the things you have, so it leads in, Lee asked on, are we going to keep the golf course going, which I think is a separate question. I mean, we did have
It
a
is.
discussion about that at the council. So for the time being, if we assume it's going to keep going, we have one request from Recreation that is the irrigation system. And that's what I'm seeing here, Ray. Is that correct?
Correct. And there's a little bit of a ad lib piece in there also, but I can tell you it's all related to the same essential issue. This past year, the way our irrigation system essentially works is we have it's a computer controller that stays in the groundskeeper's shed that sends messages out to all of the receivers on the course, electric sensors in the field. There are about 8, I believe, areas around the course that have networks of sensors. It's electrical transmission from our controller in the clubhouse to the field that produces the water for the courses. This past year, summer 24, this past summer, there was a lightning strike that hit us. It was a massive lightning strike that damaged that whole electrical system. It was costly for us to replace that. It was costly for us to find sort of not have to shut the course down. Our grounds crew did a fantastic job of responding right away. We were able to keep the course up and running, despite the fact that our system was not speaking to itself right now at that stage. What we found, I think John Coelho probably knew this already, but what we found was that the controller being 20 years old, in order to replace that controller, it'd be the way I explain it to myself through the explanation here is essentially if you all of a sudden had damage to an iPhone that you had 20 years ago, it was that finding the equipment to fix that piece of technology from 20 years ago. Our existing controller doesn't speak to any of the components that we were able to get and save and replace. We were able to replace a bunch of electrical components in the field, but there is no communication with our controller. We need a new controller. The first and most important piece that we put on here is a 40,000 request for that controller. So right now our system operates on sort of a cross your fingers and hope that we don't get hit by another electrical storm, because we are definitely susceptible in any situation where that happens. Right now, the first most important piece is that we get a computer that speaks to the equipment that we're able to piece together and find on the course, which just doesn't happen with our computer right now. the second part of that, and that's not in this request, the wording originally included the grounding device also, but we had originally tabled because I was under the understanding that we have grounding devices out there. There is a $60,000 add in next year's capital Q for grounding devices that basically it's to be able to put equipment into the fields around those 8 stations, around those 8 or 9 stations, however many stations it is out there, to place grounding devices into the course so that we can protect that equipment in the field now from a strike. The computer will the computer allows us to run an operational system. That's the $40,000 ask that we have as our one major priority this year. Our major priority for next year, which I may be asking you all to consider for this year also, is the $60,000 grounding devices, because if lightning comes this year and those pieces get fried because we don't have them, then we're going to be right back in the same situation again.
Well, I'm just gonna, Ray,
Yes,
it's
please.
not, just so you know, it's not on the list. What's
I
on the
know.
list for next year is dredging and carpeting. I'm just
I
looking.
can submit to you all. I submitted to
Well, well, we'll have a discussion.
yes.
I'm not asking you to go to a lot
Yeah.
of work. I'm just saying for any of who's looking at the list,
Yeah.
that's not on the
Okay.
list.
I haven't updated. I can share with all of you all, or I can share with you, Kathy, even now
No,
if necessary, but
you-
I have.
Do everything through Melissa, please.
I will, absolutely.
Sarah,
Yeah, first of all, I didn't see a request form for the irrigation system. Maybe I missed it. I mean, I saw the email about
there's 40,000,
I see it in the table. I didn't see a form. That's
oh, you
all.
mean in the form? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and it's, I really want to have the form for everything we're considering. It just,
I'm pretty sure
I
he
don't need
submitted
to-
it. I might not have moved it to the new meeting time, so I can,
okay.
but Ray definitely submitted
Okay,
a form.
great,
So,
great. Yeah, I'm not so interested in the quotes, and I'm not saying they came from Ray. I mean, I'm not a purchasing expert. I'm so, excuse me. My question though about the golf course is we are in a critical drought. Do we continue to irrigate the golf course during a critical drought? And I only ask because like we could spend this money and then shut down the course because there's just no water. So what does Ray or Dave, if he's still there, do we have a policy about that?
You might also describe my understanding of how it's irrigated. There's this murky pond in the middle of it, and I think most of the water is coming through that rather than through.
If there's water in it, if there's water in it.
Right, and when you talk about the drought, that got really down and the course got really brown. So maybe others who actually know how the irrigation, because I think it was kind of shutting itself down because there wasn't water to work with. I see Dave's hand is up.
Go ahead,
Or
Dave.
someone, yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy to have, can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Yes,
Happy
Dave.
to have Ray jump in, but Kathy, you're absolutely right. So one of the key differences during a drought is whether you're using, for whatever outdoor purpose you're talking about, whether you're using potable water or not. So that's a big concern, particularly with irrigation systems at houses. Most of them use potable water from our water system, and during a drought, we really don't want to be using that when we should be using that for cooking and drinking, et cetera, et cetera. So we work with the colleges and the university to try to decrease their use of potable water during those drought periods. In the case of Cherry Hill, Ray has talked about in past meetings, the pump. So we pump from groundwater and an irrigation pond that fills through a very antiquated system out there from I believe it's the Dickinson Brook,
Yes.
which is a small tributary of the Mill River. So when that works and when it's all functioning, we irrigate as much as possible. When the level of the irrigation pond, and again, that's non-potable water, that's just water from a stream. Think about it as from a stream or a pond. It is not filtered. It is just, it's just water that is flowing naturally through that stream. But when there is a drought and that pond goes down and the level of the brook goes down, we are at the mercy of Mother Nature. So we do, as far as I know, we've never considered putting, saving the grass for that season using potable water. I think we would never do that during a drought. It is what it is. And yes, as Kathy mentioned, sometimes there's a brownout out there. So that's kind of where it's at. So the cost of putting water on the course is really any fuel we use and electricity we use to put that water on the course. We did not use potable water, and I don't think we ever would.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Any other questions on this? And Lee, we can reserve a point when we're talking about what we want to write up for a few sentences on the future of the golf course, but I think not taking time now makes the most sense to me on that.
I agree.
Okay.
Thank you.
That conversation is, I know I've spoken at length about it at this meeting before, but that conversation is one that Town Hall and myself are running through right now.
So
Well, excuse me, but if there's a question about whether we're keeping this golf course or not, assure me that putting $40,000 into it then isn't a waste of money.
I can let Dave jump in after this. The question is not whether or not we are going to be operating this golf course in the foreseeable future. The question is about the long-term, the long-term structure at Cherry Hill. To answer a lot of the questions that I assume are probably at the forefront of Lee's question. There could be other questions involved there, but we are looking at the long-term structure and presence of Cherry Hill. There is no question about whether or not this is going to be a active and important function of my department for the foreseeable future.
Dave, I see your hand went up on this.
Sure, I'll quickly just add for the committee, I know Paul has mentioned in the past forming some sort of a group, a working group to look at, the history of Cherry Hill, the current status of Cherry Hill infrastructure, et cetera, the budgets and moving forward. And I think Kathy or somebody, put out there at the beginning, are we going to continue to offer this? And Ray is correct. In the short term, we expect to fully, move forward and have another successful year out at Cherry. But Paul is working with Ray and myself on the charge for this working group. And really what we'll be looking at is, what's the rationale for offering this service through recreation? Who are we serving? How much does it cost? Should we continue to do it? And should we expect it to be self-supporting? So I think you'll be hearing more from Paul and Ray on that working group in the coming weeks. So Paul is intending to launch that group very soon to look at, again, the long-term questions about Cherry Hill. or
And
the
just-
town.
In the meantime, this request it certainly protects our ability to be open and operate because we are making good revenue on the course that I think that we want to continue to do. And so this is protecting our investment. This is entirely a protection of our operations on the course right now.
And just so people know, when we looked at it, they're closer to, and sometimes more than breaking even. So it's not the money loser that it was 5 or 10 years ago, in terms of the money that comes in versus operating. So I think we have time now to say thank you very much to Ray and Stephanie. And next is fire. Is that correct, Melissa? Or am I missing something?
Thank you, everybody.
You're correct. Fire's next. Thank you.
Okay. welcome.
Welcome. Hello.
Lindsay, do you need me to make it so that one of you guys can share your screen? I know you guys had some stuff you wanted to
Yeah,
present, right?
if you're able to, that packet, which starts with just a summary of our requests and then the narrative of our requests, we can work our way through that.
Okay, let me see if I can.
I can give an overview, and then each one of the three of us is gonna handle different parts of the request based on what we take care of here.
So this is what you sent me yesterday, right?
Correct. Should be titled Capital Request Summary.
Fire capital narratives. Is this
Yeah, that's
one?
probably it.
Yeah, okay. Do I have the right thing up there? I can't
That is
see it.
correct. Nope, that's it. Thank you.
Okay,
And I guess I'll just tell you when to advance the page.
yep, sure.
So hello, everybody. I'm here, obviously, as chief of the department. I have my two assistant chiefs, Steve Gahn and Assistant Chief Olmsted here. And this is just a summary you're looking at now, which I will go through very quickly. And then the subsequent pages are our usual descriptions of our requests, so you can wrap your heads around them with photos. And at the very end, when we get to our last request, which is about an ambulance, the very last page of this packet, which you should have, just gives you a summary timeline, which I'll talk about afterwards, about the vehicles we either have on order, received, or are going to order. So this is our summary of our existing request for FY26, which we'll take you through in a moment. Replacement hose, which comes up periodically, 30,000. And Melissa, when I say where it's coming from, if I'm wrong, you can interject. From cash capital, automatic CPR devices, 44,000 from our ambulance fund. Cardiac monitors, 130,000 from our ambulance fund. I believe all those items were showing for this year, last year. Protective gear, for those of you that are newer to the committee, that's 50,000. We typically have as a recurring number every year. Due to some grants that Assistant Chief Gahn will talk about, we're actually able to pull that back this year to 20,000. Public safety radio replacement, phase 2. I'll just point out here that's for police and fire. And when we get to that section, I'll expand on what that is. You'll see a couple of items that have been crossed out. Those are requests we put in that through round 1 of capital with the town manager and Melissa, those have been deferred to next year, so I won't spend any time on those. And then under vehicles, we do have an ambulance, which we'll discuss, 500,000 from ambulance funds. I believe that's something Melissa will need to weigh in on. I'm not sure if that is ambulance funds or coming from the university for this particular fiscal year. And then a fire prevention vehicle
So
that
so that is ambulance funds, Lindsay.
Okay, so is
Yeah.
it the last ambulance that's already on order that UMass is paying for?
Well, the UMass money for ambulance support goes into the ambulance fund and then therefore gets transferred from the ambulance fund to cover
Okay,
capital.
so
It's all,
doesn't,
yeah.
it's coming from the ambulance fund is all
Yeah.
we care about here. Okay,
Yeah.
awesome, thank you.
Mhm.
So if you want to advance to the next page, Melissa, we'll start on we'll quickly summarize each item. So Steve, this is yours.
Thank you, everyone. I'm Steve Gahn. I'm the new assistant fire chief. I fill Chief Stromgren's position here. So hose. So just to give me, let me see if I can share. Will let me share my screen, Melissa?
Yeah, I can stop sharing and see if you can.
Yeah, it says I can replace it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, good.
Hold on. So if you look at this, it just gives us a little overview of where we're at. So hose, we have 18,900 feet of hose. Moving water and putting water on fires and emergencies is our business. And that's critical. So if you look at, we have 5 engines and a ladder, and each one of them carries roughly 2,700 feet. It puts 18,900 feet of hose. It's a lot of hose. As I look back in the history here, it looks like the last time, when this really started to appear in capital was about 5 or 6 years ago. We're grateful. FY25, we were able to get $25,000 in capitals for hose replacement. We were able to buy 3,950 feet of hose. It's at a 12 months of delivery time, so we will see it in about 11 months. FY26, we're asking for $30,000. It's going to get us another 4,950 feet of hose. We're hopefully, I believe that we can hold the same price that we just paid in the FY25 purchase. And if you look long term, because we do have some long term hose requests, you can see in 28 and FY30 we ask for additional funds. If you put all this together, somewhere about a little light after the year after FY30, we should have replaced 18,850 feet of hose, which in estimate is about our total. The thing with hose is that we put a lot of pressure through hose. We have, everywhere from to get water to the top of a 4 or 5 story building to the 22-story, dormitory libraries. A lot of pressure. So we can't just continue to use hose that is damaged and such like that. Our supply hose is in excess of 15 years old. And a fair amount of our attack hose is upwards of 10 years old. So this is, in reality, this is a significant need. If you look at our plan and our layout for how we've requested funding for hose, it's progressive. It takes time. It'll get us through FY30 before it's completed, but it will meet the needs and put us in a very good position.
If there's no questions, we can go on to the next page that you have, Melissa.
Okay, Sarah's hand is up. Sarah?
Yeah, just, so what is the expected lifetime of a hose? Like by FY30, everything's replaced, then how many years off till we do this again?
So the recommendation is to replace hose in about 10 years. But in reality, if you care for it, and I think we do, we have hoses with lots of excess of 15. You can get in excess of that. You can get 15 out of it, and feel good about it. It's about testing. It's about cleaning it, pressure testing it, and making sure that it's still compliant. A burst hose can obviously be a critical failure somewhere in the system, right? Both on injury and supplying water to everything from a sprinkler system to a hose line at a house. And so, yeah, 10 years is about the standard. But we've actually successfully put 15 years in our supply hose here, and much of our attack hose already excess of 10.
Thank you.
All right, so Jeff's going to talk about the automatic CPR devices. If you can just scroll down a little bit, Melissa. Thanks.
Thanks, Melissa. Jeff Olmsted. Nice to see everybody. So the two items I have on this are the CPR devices, the automatic CPR devices. This is actually a follow-up of last year's purchase. On our initial ask last year, we asked for 5. As we sort of went through the finance process, we realized we needed 2 more because we have the 2 EFR fire engines. We thought we had that and had been approved for that. And then when it was all said and done, we'd only been received the funding for the first 5. So I'm asking the $44,000 for the last 2, 6 and 7 devices that'll be part of the EFR engines. What we did was, instead of trading in all 5 devices last year of the older versions we did have that were well over 10 years old, we kept 2 of those better units. And now that we've hit this year, we're asking for the next 2, and we'll trade those older, over 10-year-old units in to offset a little bit of the pricing. Any questions on the CPR devices?
I don't see any hands up.
Okay, thank you. Cardiac monitors. So I'm asking for $130,000, unfortunately, for only 2 cardiac monitors. These are to replace, we have a total of 7 of these paramedic level cardiac monitors, defibrillators that do a variety of different things, including defibrillation and pacing, run blood pressures, O2 sats, and tidal CO2, very functional, both for adult and pediatric patients. And these 2 are to replace 2 of the existing over 10-year-old devices we have. They will go onto the frontline ambulances, and we'll move 2 of our older current LP15s instead of these LP35s to the engines. As technology gets better, prices go up. This is what the current cost is of providing this level of service, unfortunately. any questions I can answer on the cardiac monitors.
I don't see any hands.
Thank you.
Protective clothing, that comes back to me. Melissa, I'm going to try that again. I'm going to share another thing.
Okay.
Let's see, and it should, looks like it will. So what you can see here is that our request is for $20,000 this year. So we have roughly 90 total firefighters. We have 50, a cadre of 50 permanent full-time firefighters. We have upwards of 30, 25 to 30 student firefighters, and then we have 10 to 15 call firefighters this time. So that's obviously 90 sets of protective clothing that we looked at. So when we look at that, we continuously, you try to, the NFPA standards, there's a lot of requirement standards that gear, they have to have protective gear that's 10 years or less. There's actually a lot of training requirements and restrictions that we would not be able to take part in if we have gear that's greater than 10 years. Technology and things, science, things break down, gear breaks down. So there's a lot of risk after 10 years. So we were very lucky. We applied for and we were able to get an assistant firefighters grant. We get 76 sets of gear that should be on their way. It's a value of $300,000. It's done a lot for us. That's allowed us to reduce in the overall scheme, right? We were able to reduce our request this year from 50,000 to 20,000 in the capital request. That being said, the grant is great, but it's going to get us coats and pants. And a single set of coat and pants is about $3,600, but it's going to get us coats and pants. What the grant doesn't do is it doesn't do helmets, it doesn't do gloves, doesn't boots, things like that. So as we look at continuing, like, why do we need any funds this year? That's probably a question that's out there. It's things like helmets, right? So we do an assessment. We did a gear needs assessment of the department as a whole. We have 11 full-time personnel who have helmets that expire. So we're talking helmets that are 10 years, 12, 13 years old. They expire basically July 1st. That 12-month period is when some of them will expire. Helmets about $500, so you're looking at $5,500 in helmets. We have 4 vacancies. We are actively trying to fill those 4 vacancies. Each one will require gear that's $3,600 for a set, coat and pants. That's $14,400. So very quickly, we're going to eat up the FY26 request. It's $19,900. We obviously reduced our request because we understand there's other asks, right? And we had other asks this year, and we felt it's reasonable and something we can manage. When we look at FY27, just because I think it's important to see that, we look at this gear, we look at our gear that we have right now. The goal is for the permanent force members to have 2 sets of gear, because if we have a fire or something, an incident, a snow emergency, and their gear gets soaking wet, we need to put them in dry gear, because if you send them to a fire with soaking wet gear, they'll get steam burns, among other things. And so you need that second set of gear. We also do a lot of gear washing now. We've gained some grants for gear washers for cancer prevention, right? So we need that second set for at least the full-time people. So there's 16 sets that need to be replaced starting that July 1 in the FY27 in that 24-month window. So that's what the FY27 funds look at, right? So that's 16 sets. It's actually about $57,600, but we'll pace it over the FY27 and probably into FY28. Things that aren't even on here concerning to protective clothing is that boots are $650 a pair, gloves are $150 a pair, and hoods are $59 a pair each. So it actually has, it's obviously a costly, venture, but it is safety. It is personal protective equipment. And that really summarized why we want just $20,000 this year. Any questions?
I'm not seeing any hands up. Sarah, go ahead.
Yeah, just about the gloves and the help. I forget the gloves, helmets, or whatever was in the things not covered. So are you paying for those out of just your operating budget?
So we try to take them out of protective clothing. And then and sometimes a little bit it comes out of operating. So we generally don't have to replace hoods often. And gloves and then boots, they all last a number of years. So they're not annual and reoccurring for every single individual every year. And so we kind of pick them off. You can obviously have somebody put something through a glove, right? Puncture a glove or something, get it in a piece of glass or something, and obviously we then dispose of it. But there's other gloves that last years. There's boots that last years. Boots generally last the 10 years, short of getting a hole, right, taking on water. And then hoods. Hoods are, again, washable, reusable. And I think there's people, we don't issue even, people don't get new hoods every year. So it's the new people, we figure it into that $3,600 a hood and things like that.
So you were just showing us what the cost is.
I
You
was
weren't
just-
saying
yeah,
you need to buy 36 sets of these or something.
Yeah, I just wanted to show you the cost, because I
Okay,
think that
okay.
when people talk about protective clothing, they only think about the coat and the pants, and sometimes
it.
they don't think of those other things, which realistically, that's actually that, you're just $700 or $800 right there, and that's stuff per person at times.
Bob,
Yes, I was just going to ask Assistant Chief Gahn to provide the spreadsheets to Melissa. So I'm taking notes, and it'd be very helpful for my minutes in order to see those spreadsheets. If you can
Yeah,
do
I'm happy
that.
to send that over.
Okay, thank you.
yeah, so these exhibits are also very useful. They may be in our packet, but I didn't get a chance to check it. I think the paragraphs are a good way of seeing these. So thank you very much.
It's
for
more interesting to look at those photos and look at us talking.
Yeah, no, brings it to life, right?
Yeah. So the next one, the radio system, I'll expand on this a little bit, or I'll summarize what's here. For those that weren't part of the process last year, a couple things I want to point out. So this is called the Public Safety Radio System Replacement Phase 2. So the first thing, as I mentioned earlier, this is a joint police fire item. We chose, in talking to the police department last year, to put this under the fire department umbrella for capital, because it has to go under one department or the other. So it's been under the fire last year for phase 1, under fire for phase 2. It is a 50-50 project to benefit the police department's operations and the fire department's operations. So phase 1 last year, which was approved for about $900,000, is to replace what we call the infrastructure, which is essentially the base station radios that are positioned around town for receive and transmit for police and fire. So that project is underway. Phase 2, which you see here, is to replace what we call in the business subscriber units. Those are the actual radios, mobiles and portables that live in the fire trucks, live in the police cars, the ambulances, and that the firefighters and police officers carry around what you might call a walkie-talkie. It's a portable radio. So this phase 2 is all about mobiles and portables for the firefighters and the police officers. It is buying the modern, what we call tri-band radio. So they're able to operate on VHF, UHF, and 800 megahertz, which are 3 different frequency bands within the radio spectrum. This day and age, we really need to have all 3. We fire VHF. Amherst Police is UHF. All our neighboring fire departments are VHF, by the way. Franklin County is now 800 megahertz. So depending within the town, we're VHF, UHF, but as you go out to other towns for mutual aid or they come here, everybody's using different things. So the way to deal with that these days is to have radios that are capable of doing everything. And that's what we'd be purchasing. It not only gives us the ability to talk to other agencies' mutual aid, but it gives just police and fire and Amherst the ability to talk to each other as well. So that is what this particular item is for. It's the same as was presented last year. The dollar amount has gone up because all costs are going up, especially electronics. So that's what this 1.1 million is for now, is for all the subscriber units for police and fire. And the pictures there just give you a rough snapshot. The one on the left is the base station example that's being replaced this year. The one in the middle is a mobile that would be installed in a fire or police vehicle. And then one on the right is the portable that would be carried by the police officers and firefighters. Sarah, I see a hand.
I'm looking for any hands up. Sarah, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Is there any resale or salvage value for the units you'll be replacing?
Essentially, no, for the older ones, we've used them essentially to pass end of life. So there's really no value of them, to be honest. Any of the ones that are still serviceable, we still do have some that are on the newer end of things and resemble some of what you've seen, not in terms of the base stations, but in terms of the mobiles and portables. Those are actually, we're not going to get rid of those. And then in terms of the count that we're going to buy, anything that's less than 5 years old, we're going to keep, and it'll be put in secondary vehicles. We're not going to get rid of any of that stuff. Anything that's 15 to 20 years old essentially has no value. It would be recycled. And well, go ahead.
Go ahead. With us breaking it, the last year you actually asked it all at once and we broke it into two pieces. Will this now, Melissa said the other day that we hadn't moved the first piece. So will this now, the whole system will be purchased at once? Is that what the plan will be? You know,
In terms of a timeline and doing it, yes. In terms of an actual contractual purchase, it would be separate. It hasn't moved forward yet because we were under the impression we're going to be able to order this under state bid. We're discussing that with Town Hall now. They seem to believe we need to go out to bid versus just buy it on state bid. So that has sort of stalled the project while the procurement piece of it gets sorted out. So that's where we are right now with phase one. So yes, by the time phase one is sorted out, if we are granted the money for this year for FY26, then in fact it would all be happening roughly together.
And do you have, there's been on a lot of the pieces, there's been a lag in the money's authorized, you're ready to buy, and delivery. Do you have a sense on this equipment? Will there be will you run into, I know you can't predict easily,
Yeah.
but.
No, we try to stay on top, but there will be some, not as much as I'm going to talk about in the second with an ambulance or a vehicle, but in terms of electronics, the infrastructure, phase one doesn't sound like it's much of a lag time. We'd be able to get that within 1 to a couple of months of ordering it. There is sounds like about a 6-month backlog on mobile and portable radios. So nothing ridiculous, just a little bit of a wait. So the ambulance, which is our last one for this year, this is part of our cycle to replace ambulances to keep them for roughly a 10-year lifespan. We have 5 ambulances, so that means every 2 years, roughly, we are looking to purchase a new ambulance. This ambulance would be identical to what we've bought the last couple of times. It's a Ford chassis, 4-wheel drive. It is tying back into what Stephanie was talking about. The last 3 ambulances we've purchased are hybrids, as is our newest fire truck. Hybrid in our world really means idle mitigation. So the actual engine, it's not like a Prius. It doesn't shut off at the traffic lights. It's a diesel motor. But most of our fire trucks and ambulances spend their hours of life parked and running at emergency scenes versus driving like a delivery truck. So idle mitigation is where it's at to save on fuel and wear and tear. So all these units have an idle mitigation system where about 5-10 seconds after you park the vehicle, it actually shuts off, goes to battery power, runs all the lights, radios, heat, AC, etc. And to tie back into what Stephanie was talking about, we get a price for the actual vehicle. They give us what the price is going to be to add idle mitigation. It's typically a $25,000 to $30,000 upcharge for an ambulance or fire truck. And for our last 3 ambulances, I want to say at this point, our fire truck and our ladder truck, that upcharge has come out of Stephanie's fund that she was talking to you about earlier. So that's been a great partnership that works out well. So this request is for the ambulance. As I said, it would be replacing a 2016 ambulance. And if you, Melissa, if you can just jump to the last page, please. I know it gets very confusing when we talk about vehicle requests. Pre-pandemic, I could get an ambulance delivered in 9 months and a fire truck in a year. Those have all gone to a bare minimum of 2 to 2.5 years, 3 years for many cases for us, and I'm hearing about 4-year delivery times out there in the industry. So we're in new uncharted territory over the last few years where we have ambulance purchases now spread out over 4 or 5 fiscal years, which is crazy. So what's here is a summary, not only for your benefit, but for mine, because I lose track of not only what's on order, but what budget year it's coming from. So here we are requesting another ambulance for you. For those of you that have been on the committee for a while, you're gonna be like, didn't we just do this? Didn't we just do this? Well, yes, we actually do have 2 ambulances on order right now. We have one that we're expecting finally within a month or two that was ordered out of the FY23 budget. It's a year behind schedule. They're promising us it'll be here in April of this year. That's replacing our 2012 ambulance. We have another ambulance on order from the FY24 budget, which you would hope to see in about a year to a year and a quarter from now. And then the ambulance that we're proposing here is to replace our 2016 ambulance, which obviously coming up this winter will be at its 10-year mark, but we won't see it delivered for another 2 years till start of 2028. So it'll then actually be 12 years old, which is why we're advocating for its replacement now at its 9-year mark. And then the rest of that page, just for your benefit, is where we are with pumpers in the ladder tower. We're not asking for any of that this year.
Thank you. I think that's very useful to get a sense of this lag, and they're quoting a price that they're willing to hold, though. So even though it's on a 2-year lag.
Yes, fortunately, so far with we sign a contract and they owe us that vehicle for that price. There's no, in most cases, no provision for it for them to increase the charge.
Sarah.
Yeah, maybe this is just idle curiosity, but do you know why it's taking so much longer? Is there just a huge backlog now since the pandemic, or is there still supply chain problems, or what?
Yeah, I'm hearing it's more supply chain and workforce. So in some cases, you know, in something like an ambulance, that is built on a Ford chassis. So our ambulance vendor has to buy Ford chassis, meaning the motor and the body. Just they're competing with everybody else, anybody else who wants a Ford, whether it's a contractor, a delivery company, whatever. So there's something like an ambulance, there's a limitation on those chassis that affects the vendor. Fire trucks, the vendor builds the chassis, but they have to buy the motor, the diesel motor. So similar issue, electronics, supply chain issues. I'm hearing that honestly, more of the problem is workforce, that like everybody else, including us in the fire service, the people building these vehicles don't have the workforce they would like to have to keep up with demand. So that's what's restricting the flow and in fact, creating a backlog.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I think you've also addressed, it sounds like you made some changes from your original requests in terms of lowering pieces of it, but do you feel comfortable with the package that you're bringing in front of us?
Yeah, I do. I mean, as we discussed in the beginning, there are a couple of items that were deferred after the first screening of this, pushed off to next year. A couple of those are improvements of our operation. We can afford to wait a year. The vehicle one is going to be a little tougher to get through. We're not sure if the existing vehicle is going to pass inspection, but we'll do what we can to make it through. You know, other than that, I would say that all these items, as we've discussed, are sort of what we consider the basics of our operation. You know, hose, cardiac monitors, radios, gear. Those are the tools of what we do with every day. So they are a needed request for our operation.
Anyone else with questions? And I noticed some of the questions that were sent in, you've already woven into these in terms of the mileage on this. So thank you very much for the presentations. I found it very helpful. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not seeing any hands up. So you will make sure to get this package, and as Bob asked for, the spreadsheet that breaks down that Steve showed us on the pieces. I mean, we take pretty good minutes. Well, we make an effort to have good minutes. You know, it's this on Zoom, but it helps us when we write the final recommendations, to bring what you brought to us to life a bit more. So the extra effort you took is greatly appreciated.
Absolutely glad to do it. It helps our cause out to help you out.
So I think unless you want to stick around, you are free. Your team is free to leave us.
Okay. Thank you very much, everybody.
Bye. And now we have conservation, correct, Dave? You're next up.
Actually, no, Kathy, I think working with Melissa, we had scheduled that for the 26th.
Okay, so,
Yeah.
so conservation, so that does.
Conservation and planning will go on the
Okay,
26th.
okay, so you're gonna stay with planning. She said planning was postponed, but she didn't say,
Yeah, no, I think the plan was to do them both together on the 26th. And I'm just here to listen and chime in where helpful. Thanks.
okay, so maybe what I'll do, since we amazingly got through a lot, pretty quickly, I have, and I will send it to you all, but plotting out our meetings as we look forward. Next week, we will be getting through all the projects that are in front of us. And Melissa just told us today there would be a vehicle summary, and hopefully by next week, it will include the DPW because they have a lot of vehicles. They're not asking for any new ones this year, but we'll be able to see what the status is on that. And we can, if we have time, we can begin a discussion about any areas where we have questions about projects, or begin that discussion if we have time. The resident requests were all sent. I made sure that Melissa sent the resident requests to DPW and flagged the ones that had to do with blinking lights, crosswalks, lighting on Dana Street. So everything that was traffic calming or adjusted. So I'm hoping that he will have responses of views. As people may remember, the police said they're for all of it because they think of it as safety. So I'm hoping we'll also be able to have at least some more insight to the various residents. The week after that, so that's the 19th, the week after that, we'll be at the point of talking about whether we want to make changes and, either lower, delete, postpone any of the projects in terms of what our recommendations are going to be. And what has happened in the past, for those of you who haven't been on the committee, is to the extent the town manager is hearing those, sometimes that just gets adjusted as a result of our discussion, so that 5-year plan, the 2026 numbers change. And right now it's in a $500,000 deficit, so trying to get to zero on that would be part of our focus. Then we have a week where I won't be here, Sarah. So that first week in April, you'll be the chair. So that conversation will continue. And I didn't hear any no's about moving the following Wednesday to a Friday meeting. What I didn't get from people yet. So instead of meeting because I'll be back by then. And so that will be the beginning of drafting the report. I'm making decisions about this, and then I will get a draft and work with Sarah back to everyone. So the final meeting will be that next week in April, so April 16th. I'll send the schedule out to you, but I think that's enough time to get the report done. That I write quickly once I know what I'm writing, and we have a template of how to set it up. It's just like what goes here and there. So I spoke really quickly, and Sarah has her hand up. So I am ready now to hear any questions or comments. Yeah.
Thank you. I thought Dave just said we wouldn't hear conservation and planning until the 26th. So
I think it's next. It's next.
Next week will be the 18th or something. So
Yeah.
that's.
So Dave, if she moved you off today's schedule, if Melissa, then the next one is when DPW comes in
And the schools.
Schools.
and the schools. So it's schools and DPW on whatever the Wednesday is. So
The 19th,
it would have
sorry.
been the 19th. It's the 19th.
If he can come then we'll have heard all of them.
Yeah.
No? Bob is shaking his head.
I don't think that there'll be time, not with DPW and the schools. I can stay later, but that's a lot to handle in one meeting.
Okay, so that leaves out, I'm just looking for the project list on the, I've got it here in this piles of paper. So Dave, that means your set will have to be on the 26th, and we'll have to to the extent I sent a set of questions in on them, and so.
Yes, I
any-
will, yeah, I will
So-
be, yeah, I have those pretty
So
much done.
anyone who has questions on that, and then there's just one planning request. The planning request is for $50,000 for consultant. So
Mm.
if people can get the questions in advance on the $355,000 worth of concert, oh no, if I take Stephanie out, it's a lot less. And so one of the questions, well, Dave, people will see it. One of the questions is trail improvements are also under CPAC. So
Right.
why are we seeing trail improvements here? So some of them were, now.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
will answer those questions. 350,000 for conservation, that sounds good, Lynn, Kathy.
Well, 250 was.
No, 250 is
Yeah.
sustainability, and when you add all the
Yes,
others, it gets to
yes.
355. So
I
that
got
means
you.
there's another, 100-ish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With,
Kathy, to whom should we send, if we have questions, should we send them to you, to Melissa?
you, at this point, you can send them directly to Melissa, because I sent whatever questions I had or had gotten, just send them directly to Melissa, and she's, same with DPW and schools.
Okay,
So, and I sent them in a way that she just could excerpt them and send them to the presenters. And what I noticed is in today's package, Fire had answered, Stephanie put the detail that she was quickly running through for us, but on what was last year's for and what's the plan for this year. So all of that is in an answer packet. And I think that's a really efficient way for people, for us to have answers at the point we're talking, rather than waiting to get back a week later. So any questions on that? So, and I'm glad to share the questions I've sent on DPW
Yeah.
and schools,
Yeah.
but I just sent them directly to Melissa to avoid influencing other people. Sarah, yeah.
yeah, maybe I haven't seen all the packets or something, but how do I have questions if I haven't seen the description of the
Yeah, it was,
quest?
exactly.
I don't know
didn't-
what, tell me
I-
what the project is, that's my.
So for example, on DPW has a big chunk of money for the intersections. And then the next year, an even bigger, 6 million. And I know the other committee that Bob is on has already
TSO.
raised that, what are these numbers? We have no description of what they are, and they seem completely out of line with what we think will be needed. And we're not even sure about the timing. So the only things I could do, Sarah, is say, can you tell us what this is about and how you came up with these numbers? So at this point, all I had was a column of numbers, not a written request on further definition.
Well, maybe, I guess Melissa isn't here anymore. Maybe Jennifer
she-
knows. But have those departments not submitted those capital requests, and could they not be put in to start creating the upcoming packets?
If they've submitted them, I'm just looking ahead. She started to populate each of these. I'm just going to double check on my, maybe Jen can tell us. So some were added to the packages, but I'm not sure all, but I'll make that direct request for her, Sarah, to make sure we get whatever was submitted ASAP, so we can be looking at it before we meet on the 19th.
Right. Thank you.
I see Lee's hand is up and Jennifer's hand is up also.
Sorry to be, could you just go again through what's going to be on the agenda for the 19th?
19th is schools and DPW.
Okay, important
And-
ones. Thank
And
you.
what Bob just said, we probably won't have time for conservation, but it's that set of conservation. And at that point, we will have done every project on the list. I mean, every department and project.
Kathy, DPW includes the enterprise funds? Or are they separate?
They are separate because we never see
You
any.
never see them because they just.
They
they're-
come out, they
come out of their
They
own-
don't come out of the amount of money that we're talking about. They're self-financed out of the fees. So we will see them in finance
Yeah.
in terms of equipment, but we won't see them here. And actually, there's been a recommendation, and I do see your hand up a few times at the end of our report, is that when Paul does the capital plan, for 5 years. It would be good to do sections on the enterprise fund. So even though it's in another piece, if people think we're purchasing a major piece of equipment, it would be good to show that. We just have never put them in the same document. So Jen, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, thank you. I can see that there are quite a few requests already that came in from DPW, and looks like there's 4 right now for the school. So I can meet with Melissa and we can get those in the packet. So that way you can see them ahead of time and be able to ask questions for whatever you need to.
That's great. And I'll just have her alert us when she's put them there. So, otherwise what I do is I just keep checking every day to see if something has appeared. Dave?
Yeah, Kathy, I forgot to mention earlier, I think in your packet today, you do have a follow-up
in-
memo from Rob and Jeremiah LaPlante
Okay,
on the
yes.
capital that they requested.
Yes.
As most of you know, I work, kind of with them closely and of course, Melissa. So I hope the memo, kind of clarified anything that might have been unclear when they met with you. And again, we're happy to circle back as your time allows if you think that's necessary. But I think the point being there is the capital list is extremely long. I think their number was north of $10 million, which is simply the reality of now really knowing what these buildings need. And then, of course, the other point they made, I think, was having this flexible approach is, can they have this $1 million knowing that you know what projects are priorities and there is 10 times that much work, but they want the flexibility to move from project to project, given the uncertainties of those projects.
So I just looked, it was put in apparently yesterday because it has a March 13th date on it, but it is, we had asked them, could they give us something more than just the $1 million that what might be the priorities? And I'd actually sent an additional question as if you haven't spent last year's 500,000, could you live with 500 or 600 this year? That would get you back up to $1 million. So and we can repeat questions if we haven't gotten answers to
Well,
them, but there
I
is this
think-
memo now, yeah.
I think the short answer to that, Kathy, is in the memo. I mean, there's
Yeah.
$10 million worth of projects, so you can,
Right.
you
It's
can,
just, Dave, just if
Yeah.
we did the
Yeah.
same thing. So I'm just saying that if we did the same thing with schools and said, give us your mega list, and they wanted a pot of money, we would still want to know what you're going to do next year. So I agree that we've got, the lists are usually bigger than the amount, but it's a great I'm just looking through the memo, yeah.
well, but specifically to answer your question, and again, I have very little to do with the schools other than the track and field. So I don't want to really compare apples to oranges, and I'm not sure that conversation is applicable here. They have given you everything you need to make a decision. There's clearly $10 million worth of funds there. So if it's reduced by 500,000 this year, so they have 500 from last year and 500 from this year, there's $1 million, and they will continue, the town will continue to get behind on capital. So I think they went into the roof project here at Town Hall. So maybe you could do almost half a roof, but then there's $300,000 in mobilization costs. So it simply is what it is. I think what I want to put out there is we have never had more information, more accurate information on town buildings in the 20 plus years I've worked for the town than we do today. So it is a hard pill to swallow for all of us, but I just want to compliment Jeremiah and Rob for getting it to you. And it is a hard pill for all of us to swallow, but the numbers are there. They don't lie, and they're coming out of these assessments, which we've never had before, which the council has been asking for probably 10 years.
So thank you. So Sarah, I see your hand is
Yeah,
up.
so I have one particular question about that list or that memo that Dave was just describing, because I did see it. But we could postpone the answer to another time. I think I remember seeing the, that it was the North Amherst School or something, which I guess is that terrible little building that used to house the Survival Center, right? And so one question is, you know, I'm always very interested, is this really still a school building, or did the school committee formally convey it back to the town? And I have that same question about the Southeast Street School, or whatever that one is called. But my question really now is it worth maintaining some of the, like that building in particular? I can't imagine that we could ever use it without investing so much money in it, that we might as well just knock it down and keep the real estate. So I don't know that just because we could sink a lot of money into repairing town buildings, is that really going to be the best thing to do in every case? So,
Do you mind if I answer that one quickly, Kathy?
Sure,
On
go ahead.
North
because
Amherst
that's-
School. Actually, the North Amherst School building at the corner of Pine Street, Meadow Street, Route 63, and Sunderland Road is actually in very good shape.
is it?
We
But
have
it's not
invested.
accessible. It's not.
Oh, no, it is.
It has,
Oh, yes.
it has a lift. There's a
Yeah,
lift.
it has a
with that.
lift. Oh, yeah, I wouldn't say fully
Okay.
accessible, but it is
It's a
accessible.
bizarre lift, sir. It's the kind
Yeah.
where you stand on a platform and the platform goes up.
That
Okay.
building,
I take it
Other-
back. Okay.
other than, the two main issues there are the roof and the heating system, but the general outside what am I looking for?
The envelope.
The building envelope is in pretty good shape except for the roof. We've
Okay.
invested significant money, CDBG money, in that building over the years. So it's in really good shape. It's
Okay.
been used for Head Start. It's currently used. It is our major place for town records. So in the basement of that building, town records are stored, required storage for town records. So
And all the voting
it's
equipment, I think.
the voting machines,
Yeah.
it's an incredibly important building, and
okay.
the usable space, if you will, for offices and people, et cetera, we've looked at for swing space for when we're ready, DPW, fire, and other functions. But the building, other than the roof and the heating system, is in very good shape, and we've invested hundreds of thousands of dollars of CDBG.
It has
And-
very tiny toilets in one of the rooms,
Yeah.
because it was
Yes.
used, it's been, when you
Right.
walk in one, that looks like a normal adult's toilet, and you
Yeah.
walk in another.
But I would
Yeah.
I would contrast that with, say, part of the South Amherst School on the South Amherst campus.
Yeah.
So there's a newer addition to that building on the south, and then the historic building on the north. Both of those buildings are in tough shape, but again, the bones of the historic building are really pretty solid. If we were to do anything in the future, affordable housing there, whatever, mind you, we would demo the south non-historic portion. That is not going to survive some reuse of that space. But anyway, we'll talk about that in the future. But I just
Okay.
wanted to clarify, on North Amherst School, the bones are very good in that building.
All right. I confess I was only ever in the basement.
Yes.
So my, impression.
Yeah, the upper two floors are really, and they've been used
You know,
for.
You were
Head
probably
Start,
there when the
other
survival center.
I was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Good,
It's just,
great
it doesn't
question.
have, it's a good question though, Sarah, because it doesn't have a lot of space. When you get it, it
Yeah.
looks like a pretty big building, but that's because the ceilings are so high. When you do the lift, you've got a few big rooms, but not lots of space.
Yeah. Okay.
So I see Bob's hand is up. This is great that you put this on the list.
Yeah, I just have a question. It's maybe more for Melissa, who's not with us, but I'm trying to find the ambulance fund in the program summary. The summary of this, and where we had some things coming from the ambulance fund, but they're listed as either other or cash capital or something. So maybe we should be a little bit more explicit about what's in the ambulance fund that we're using for capital this year.
Yeah, I think that's a good question, Bob, because if you look at it as revenues that when we're hearing that $500,000 could be paid from the ambulance fund, is it coming out of, so the question, Jen, is it coming out of the money we have, or will it be paid for by this other source? Because there's not a line. I'm just looking at the
Well, it's
sources.
called other, isn't it?
There's an
Is-
other
is-
line. I don't know
other-
what.
Is other the ambulance fund, the 674? Yeah, so,
Okay.
so
I
that's,
mean, if
where-
that's all it is, we should just call it ambulance fund. It would be.
then we
more
could call, if
informative.
it's all ambulance, then right, Sarah, we could call it ambulance.
Yeah, I believe that is ambulance, but we'll double check.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, that's a good point, Bob. And just so others know, I will work with Melissa on this, but we're not showing the state aid. I've mentioned this a few times. We're not showing the state aid number, and it's a big number for roads. And I just want to figure out some way, Jen, of getting the number, because we need to feature it, that whatever we put in as cash capital is in addition to another amount. So the residents of the town don't think we've suddenly gone from spending nearly 2 million to 500,000. It's like 900,000. Yes, Sarah?
Well, could that perhaps be done in the capital improvement plan? I think that's
Well,
what
it has
we don't do that, right? But it incorporates.
It has always been a line. If you look at last year, it's always been a line, and right now it's been blanked out because the way the town shows it in the budget is it puts it over on a grant page. So
I understand. I'm just saying there might be another document in which to inform the public about here are all the sources of funding for roads and sidewalks. Some of it is JCPC, some of it is.
Yeah, just
Chapter
some
90 or whatever.
way that we can show it so it doesn't look like we suddenly dramatically reduce the amount we're spending. Jen?
Would it be acceptable to maybe put it as a footnote at the bottom of that capital plan that for that listing that funding source for that money? So that way it's kind of with the request, but noting that it's coming from another place.
I think that's fine. And then if you put it on it, it's both a revenue and an expense, and it's all dedicated to sidewalks and roads. You know, if we're not going to put it as a line, I mean, we don't make any decisions about it as a committee. We just know we've got that money.
Right.
So I think that would be fine, but to completely not show it would be a pretty major departure from the way we've talked about investment in roads and sidewalks.
Okay.
And I think I finally understand the difference on why Chapter 90 is treated differently in the budget than Chapter 70, but because Chapter 70 always shows up, and 90 never does. It's over in the grant world. So those are sort of housekeeping kinds of things on what this 5-year plan will look like. And Dave, thank you very much for drawing our attention to that response to our questions. And it doesn't quite answer what would be your highest priority for FY26, but it shows you I've got $10 million worth of things to choose from. So that was the other question we said, you know, if you're asking for $1 million and you have 500 that you haven't spent yet, so you basically have $1.5 million, the 500 was roofs. What is the most likely thing you think you're going to be spending on in 26? You don't need to answer it right now, but if that was,
I will follow up with them on that, but I thought there was a strong leaning in the memo toward the town hall roof.
Yeah.
right, and the
because-
question on that is why wouldn't you go for CPAC? Because it's a historic building.
We potentially will, but normally what CPAC asks is, you know, what else are you bringing to the table? So the idea might be to bring, let's say, $1 million of capital money and then go for $1 million plus of CPAC. So that
then-
was kind of the idea, is to get some money and then
And
leverage
I just,
CPAC money.
and this is me probably being too tough on this, but I'd like to know that the whole roof needs it, because our 1810 slate roof farmhouse had drones flown all around it, and it repaired everything that needed to repair. And they said, you're good. It's been good for 100 years. But so I just would like to know that we really have to go for the big one. But I'm not challenging you on that. I'm just saying that it seemed like that's where Jeremiah was going with, of the things you listed, he would do first on that. So we can.
Well, I think there's strong leaning in the memo and discussion, although I was not here at your last meeting, was the town hall roof. And again, their other strong leaning was, or based on what they know about the roof, the slate roof, and the estimates they've got, is that it is the entire roof that should be replaced.
Okay.
So, including some of the very unique architectural parts of the roof, which are very challenging to redo. And again, I think they talked about staging and doing it all at once as opposed to mobilizing once with staging, taking it down, doing
you
half the
can't- you
roof,
can't-
and then doing it again.
That doesn't make any sense for,
Yeah.
well, I
But
shouldn't.
just so you know, we did plan to go to CPAC in the fall round of 25. But we also thought that going for a $2.3 million ask of CPAC was probably going to be a challenging piece for them for a lot of reasons. And again, maybe coming to the table with half of that from capital made sense.
That's very helpful. So we've managed to finish, if we're finished. And let me, I put public comments at the end, so let me just, there are no public. There is no public. There are no people there.
No people.
So you can write it, public comments, no public. And Lee did minutes from last week and I did a quick edit. A lot of it was just formatting. And I asked Melissa to put it directly in the minutes section because Sarah had asked where her minutes went. But if people want to see the minutes from each, we can send them. We can just be regularly sharing them wherever we want or posting them in the next meeting. I think they'll be useful when we are making decisions on what we're going to say about all of this. So Bob is on for this week and we have people signed up for all. And I will do one more polling just for people to think if we shift to that Friday, do you prefer a morning time or an afternoon time? And I have the elementary school building committee right in the middle, but morning can be 9 to 11 or any place up to 12 and afternoon can be anywhere from 1:30 or on. So just on which you would prefer if we shift it that, and I'll just send it out again because no one said they couldn't do that. So I'll just give those two choices again, morning or afternoon. And I think that's it. So I want to thank everybody. And I knew in advance we were going to be missing a couple people and they will be back. Nat was always not going to be here for this week, the entire week. And Bridget couldn't rearrange her life.
And we have school committee in 2 hours.
Right. So we are, I guess I should take is everyone okay with adjourning? So we'll just raise your hand. Is everyone ready to adjourn? Yes. Great. Okay. So we are adjourned at 3:32. Thank you all very much and have a nice
Bye.
weekend.
You too.
There.